They say a storm doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it whispers in the calm, just before everything breaks. Pregnant wife was drugged by Mistress when the millionaire found out it was too late. They say, love can make a person blind, but money can turn even the most innocent romance into a battlefield of greed, betrayal, and desperation. In this story, we will take you into the lavish world of a millionaire named Marcus Whitmore, his devoted and pregnant wife Olivia, and a cunning mistress named Sierra. A woman who masked cruelty beneath charm and whose obsession would spark a chain of events no one could undo. Who will stop at nothing to claim his fortune when love, pride, and envy collide under the glimmer of wealth? There's no telling how dark the consequences can be. Brace yourself. This is a tale of ruthless betrayal, hidden agendas, and the terrifying moment it all goes too far. Olivia Whitmore stood by the window of her sun-drenched bedroom, one gentle hand resting on the curve of her pregnant belly, the other lifting the lace curtain to peer down the winding driveway. She was 6 months along, and already she could feel the life stirring inside her, reminding her of the future she and her husband Marcus had so meticulously planned. The morning light spilled into the room, illuminating her features. Her serene hazel eyes and soft smile spoke volumes of her excitement. She had no idea that this very estate, so peaceful now, would soon become the setting of her worst nightmare. The sweeping lawn of the Whitmore estate in the Hamptons, not far from the iconic Montauk Lighthouse, glistened with dew, a testament to the comfort and affluence that surrounded her. From a distance, the growl of an expensive car engine signaled Marcus's return from an early business meeting. He was the type of husband who liked to surprise Olivia with small tokens of affection, flowers from a local florist, a new novel he thought she might enjoy, or even a simple cup of freshly brewed decaf coffee to respect her pregnancy. He always seemed to know what would make her smile. But lately there were moments, faint, fleeting, when his eyes held a distance she couldn't quite name. She felt a flutter in her stomach, an emotional reaction that blended perfectly with the tiny kicks of their unborn child. The Whitmore story had begun with a whirlwind romance 5 years earlier. Olivia had been an event coordinator at a luxury hotel in downtown Manhattan, struggling to pay off her student loans from NYU and support her ailing father. Marcus was the wealthy entrepreneur hosting a charity gala at that hotel. Sparks flew from the moment they met. Olivia's good heart and determination were the perfect match for Marcus's ambition and compassion. He hadn't always been rich. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Brooklyn, Marcus had fought tooth and nail to grow his business from a tiny app startup into a global powerhouse. With a net worth crossing 9 figures, marriage came quickly for them. 2 years into their relationship, they exchanged vows in a small, elegant ceremony. Theirs was a love story that, from the outside, looked as unshakable as the mansion's walls. Olivia let the curtain fall back into place and drifted toward the bedroom door, her fingertips still resting on her belly. She felt the baby kick in excitement, a reminder that this life inside her was real. The hum of the car engine cut off, replaced by Marcus's voice echoing through the foyer. She descended the polished marble stairs and was greeted by her husband's broad grin. He had that look of relief and triumph that always came after sealing an important deal. "What's with that look?" Olivia teased. Marcus leaned in, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The real estate acquisition went through. If everything goes as planned, we'll add another strong pillar to the Whitmore portfolio." Olivia gently slapped his shoulder in a playfully scolding manner. "You work too hard. Even your weekends are stolen by these deals." Marcus chuckled. "This one will be worth it. Besides, I plan to delegate most of the daily tasks to my team. I want to spend more time with you and our little one." Life seemed perfect in that moment. A beautiful home, a child on the way, and a love that had withstood the tests of time and ambition. It never crossed Olivia's mind that, lurking in the corridors of wealth and power, envy festered. And it never occurred to Marcus that, despite his best intentions, someone close to him might be harboring ulterior motives. Within the labyrinth of wealth, the lines between friends, colleagues, and opportunists are often blurred. The environment Marcus navigated demanded constant vigilance. Business associates disguised as confidants, social climbers parading as friends. Yet of all the people in his sphere, one person had managed to slip past his guard with uncanny ease. Sierra Langston. Sierra was introduced to Marcus through a mutual acquaintance at a charity banquet at the St. Regis Hotel in Miami. She was captivating, tall, with raven black hair and a killer smile that commanded attention. She had just launched her own public relations consultancy, a small firm with big aspirations. At first glance, her intelligence and charm seemed overshadowed only by her drive to succeed. Marcus believed she could help refine the public image of his ever-expanding business empire. So he struck a contract with her PR firm. That might have been the biggest mistake of his life. In the beginning, Sierra displayed an unyielding work ethic that earned Marcus's respect. She orchestrated philanthropic events that showcased the Whitmore brand as not just about profit, but about giving back to the community. She collaborated with Olivia on planning a couple of charity luncheons, leading the two to share frequent conversations. Olivia, though not entirely trustful of every newcomer, allowed herself to see the best in Sierra, particularly because Marcus praised Sierra's work ethic so often. But beneath Sierra's polished exterior, envy simmered. She recognized Olivia's place, the beloved wife, expecting a precious heir, living in a palatial home, and adored by the media as a kind-hearted socialite. Sierra wanted that life, or at least something close to it. She had grown up witnessing a toxic dynamic in her own family. Her father, a man of considerable means, left her mother for a younger woman, effectively abandoning them. Ever since, Sierra had vowed that she would never be on the losing end of such a situation. She would be the one in control, the one who took what she wanted. Consequences be damned. And what Sierra wanted now was Marcus Whitmore. She was drawn not just to his wealth, though that was a massive factor, but to his kindness, his quiet confidence, and the sense of security he exuded. When she looked at Olivia, she saw a life that, in her mind, could have been hers. If only she had arrived earlier. She told herself that fate had played her a cruel trick. Marcus should have been single and searching for a suitable partner right when Sierra entered his life. A part of her truly believed Marcus would be happier with her. Someone who understood the intricacies of business, who could strategize and plan, who wouldn't settle into domestic bliss. She saw Olivia's pregnancy as a weakening chain, something that would tether Marcus to his wife and child for life, leaving no room for a woman like Sierra to slide in. Olivia, completely unaware of the seeds of sabotage sprouting in Sierra's mind, continued to trust her. They texted about upcoming events, color schemes, floral arrangements, and philanthropic themes. Whenever Olivia had to delegate tasks involving public image or event management, she would call Sierra to help. Yet a subtle tension surfaced. Several times after phone conversations or meetings, Olivia would walk away with a nagging feeling in her gut, something that she couldn't quite place. She might have attributed it to pregnancy hormones or stress. Whenever she tried to bring it up to Marcus, mentioning how Sierra could sometimes be overly attentive to him or how her compliments seemed to grow a bit too personal, Marcus would wave it off. "Sierra's just doing her job," he'd say. "She's in public relations. It's literally her job to make people feel special." Olivia, never one to distrust her husband, swallowed her concerns. She stared at Marcus's face as he reassured her, searching for something, anything that didn't feel rehearsed. But the smile he gave her was the same one he used at charity galas, polished and warm. She persuaded herself it was mere jealousy or the anxiety of an expectant mother. Still, a quiet ache nestled beneath her ribs, the kind of ache that only intuition can cause. She never realized that those fleeting misgivings were the voice of intuition, trying to warn her of an impending storm that would tear her life apart. Sierra began to build her plan on small acts of sabotage. It started with little things, nudging Marcus to spend more time at glamorous social events under the guise of networking, ensuring Olivia was left at home alone or busy with prenatal checkups. She'd plant the idea casually, with a tilted smile and an, "I think it would be good for the company if you're seen at the plaza this weekend." She constantly complimented Marcus, proclaiming he was the driving force that helped her blossom as a PR specialist, feigning gratitude to win his favor. Each word dripped with admiration, but there was something else too. hunger. She also offered to drop by the estate to assist Olivia with philanthropic tasks. While Olivia saw these visits as acts of kindness and was grateful for an extra pair of hands, Sierra leveraged them to gather personal information about Olivia's health, routines, and preferences. She noted the prenatal vitamins, the brand of medicine Olivia took for minor back pains, and the pantry's contents. She lingered longer in the kitchen than necessary, her eyes scanning bottles and expiration dates, committing details to memory. Sierra pretended to be curious and supportive, claiming to be fascinated by everything related to pregnancy. Olivia, trusting by nature, didn't see any issue in sharing details. "I might want to be a mom someday," Sierra would say with a light laugh. "It's good to learn from someone who's doing it right." The irony burned, if only Olivia had known. But the first real push of Sierra's plan came when she hired a private investigator to unearth details about Marcus's business expansions, his schedule, and his marriage. The investigator discovered that Marcus had once shown interest in real estate ventures in New York, a city Sierra adored. To her, this was a strategic advantage. She pitched an idea to Marcus to expand his philanthropic and corporate presence in Manhattan. She underlined the prestige it would add to the Whitmore brand. "You could own both coasts," she whispered during one late meeting, her voice like velvet. "Think about the legacy." Marcus, enthralled by the prospect of a bi-coastal empire, began traveling to New York more frequently, often accompanied by Sierra, since she knew the city's social scene so well. These trips, while business on the surface, gradually turned personal behind closed doors. Sierra was skilled at using Marcus's occasional loneliness and stress to her advantage. She'd appear with encouraging words, subtle touches, and an ever-present listening ear. She noticed the exact moments his guard dipped after late-night flights, during quiet elevator rides when the city lights blurred behind his fatigue. She made him believe that she, better than anyone, understood the burden he carried. She praised him endlessly, lightly contrasting herself with Olivia, whom she painted as having less and less time to support Marcus because of her pregnancy. She never directly criticized Olivia. It was more a gentle manipulation. A passing comment here, a sympathetic sigh there, always wrapped in false concern. "It must be hard for her," Sierra would muse aloud, "being so limited right now, just when you're building something so big." A sly insinuation that Olivia's pregnancy limited her from standing by Marcus's side during these crucial business expansions. Marcus, despite his devotion to his wife, began to sense a subtle shift in his emotional landscape. He told himself nothing had changed, yet there were moments when Sierra's validation felt more present than Olivia's lullabies and doctor visits. He would never dream of replacing Olivia. Yet something about Sierra's presence made him feel empowered. With her, he didn't have to explain his ambition. It was understood, even celebrated. She laughed at his jokes during investor dinners, applauded his vision, made him feel like a man of unstoppable momentum. He came to associate her with professional success, forward momentum, and a glitzy lifestyle that felt miles away from reading baby name books at home. It was a slow, insidious kind of lure, one that he neither confronted nor questioned. In one particularly charged moment, after a dinner with New York investors, Sierra had too much to drink. She leaned against Marcus in the back of a limousine, whispering about how she wished she'd met him sooner. Her breath was warm against his ear as she brushed her fingertips across his lapel, tears hinting at vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. Marcus was disarmed by the closeness. There was something tragic in her gaze, something that made him feel like a protector and a prize all at once. He could see her eyes shining with what looked like admiration. Or was it something darker? In that split second, the lines of fidelity blurred. He found himself resting his hand on hers, a gesture of comfort, but one teetering dangerously close to intimate betrayal. The contact was brief but electric. His chest tightened with a cocktail of guilt, thrill, and confusion. He stopped himself before it went too far. Guilt consumed him. He pulled away, stammering something about them being tired and needing rest. Sierra apologized, feigning embarrassment, yet a smirk lingered on her lips as she turned her head to the window. A glint of satisfaction flickered in her expression, like a chess player who had moved a queen into striking distance. She was satisfied to see the seeds of confusion take root in Marcus's eyes. Back in the Hamptons, Olivia began noticing changes in Marcus's behavior. He was away more often, traveling not just to New York, but also making sudden trips to Chicago, San Francisco, and even overseas on short notice. He was somewhat evasive about the details. Olivia tried to be supportive and understanding. After all, she was familiar with Marcus's world. But as the months went on, she felt a growing distance that defied explanation. At night, Marcus would slip into bed after midnight, smelling of cologne that wasn't his, or occasionally with the faintest trace of perfume that didn't belong to Olivia. She blamed it on business events, women hugging him and greeting, typical social mingling. Still, she caught him staring at the ceiling, sometimes lost in thought. Not just distracted, but absent, as if something heavy lived behind his eyes. Whenever she tried to talk to him, he would distract her with kisses, gently reminding her that she shouldn't stress for the baby's sake. But the presence of a looming secret was as tangible as the thick drapes in their bedroom. One evening, Olivia's concern peaked when she discovered that Marcus's phone, usually left on the nightstand, was suddenly guarded. He'd take it to the bathroom with him, pocket it whenever she entered the room, or dismiss calls as spam. The phone never left his side now. She noticed how quickly his thumb would swipe to silence the screen the moment she got near. Olivia wasn't one to snoop, but her gut twisted with suspicion. A swirl of dread kept her awake at night, giving rise to nightmares of betrayal. She yearned to trust her husband, but the signs were there, glaring at her like flashing neon lights. And through every flashing signal stood one constant shadow: Sierra. She couldn't ignore Sierra, who, for her part, played her cards meticulously. She would occasionally show up at the Whitmore estate unannounced, claiming she had urgent documents for Marcus to review. She'd stay just long enough to appear as though she was doing her job. Yet, whenever Olivia appeared, Sierra radiated faux warmth, smiling widely, complimenting Olivia's pregnancy glow, and expressing excitement for the baby. It was nauseating. Her compliments landed too perfectly, like rehearsed lines from a script. Olivia tried to be polite, yet she couldn't shake off the uneasiness that accompanied Sierra's arrival. Something in Sierra's eyes made Olivia's skin crawl, though she couldn't decipher why. It was a feeling she couldn't name, only feel, like standing in a room that looked fine, but somehow reeked of danger. The last straw that kindled Olivia's suspicions occurred one afternoon when she received a delivery at the estate, a small, finely wrapped box addressed to Marcus. It came from an expensive jewelry store located in Soho. The label read, "To Marcus Whitmore, with gratitude." Naturally, Olivia assumed it was a corporate gift from an associate or sponsor, but the gift receipt inside told a different story: a gold chain bracelet with an engraving that read MW plus SL forever. Olivia stared at the delicate script, her heart pounding. Sells Sierra Langston. Her mind reeled. Her throat tightened. The air in the room thickened. How long had she been doubting her instincts? And now, this was real, tangible. She didn't confront Marcus that day. Instead, she locked herself in the master bathroom, sank onto the tiled floor, and wept. She was pregnant, vulnerable, uncertain if all her deepest fears were about to be confirmed. She told herself it could be a misunderstanding. Maybe Sierra had sent something to commemorate their business partnership. Yet that forever felt too intimate, too personal. It was a direct arrow of intent. When Marcus arrived home, Olivia had planned to ask him outright about the gift. However, Marcus looked worn, battered by an exhausting day, and visibly concerned for Olivia, who had been struggling with minor morning sickness episodes that sometimes hit her in the evenings. He laid a gentle hand on her belly, pressing his forehead to hers, whispering about how he couldn't wait to hold their child. In those moments, Olivia's rage and suspicions softened, overshadowed by her love for him and her desire to maintain peace, for the baby's sake. If nothing else, and that was the moment Sierra had been waiting for. The moment when Olivia would be off balance, uncertain, and easier to manipulate. The mistress was poised to strike, and a devastating storm was on the horizon. As Olivia entered her 7th month of pregnancy, new complications arose. She complained of persistent headaches and dizzy spells. Her doctor, a reputable obstetrician at Mount Sinai in Manhattan, instructed her to rest more and keep stress levels to a minimum. Marcus, ironically fueled by guilt, insisted she stop attending social events. Despite Olivia's mild protests, she hated feeling helpless. She eventually succumbed to bed rest, for the health of the baby. Sierra seized this opportunity. With Olivia largely confined to the estate and Marcus frequently traveling, she found ways to insert herself deeper into Marcus's personal life. Every time Marcus flew out for business, Sierra ensured she was on the same plane or arrived in the same city. By coincidence, when they returned to New York, Sierra would meet him at his office under the pretext of urgent PR matters. She'd flirt just enough to keep him intrigued, but always held back to maintain the tension. It was a carefully choreographed dance of seduction, designed to make Marcus question his loyalties. Without outright abandoning his moral compass, Marcus was caught in a web of conflicting emotions. He adored Olivia. She was his wife, the mother of his child. But the stress from balancing a booming empire and an expanding family weighed heavily on him. And Sierra's presence provided an illicit thrill that temporarily numbed the pressures. While he hadn't crossed the final line into a full-blown physical affair, he knew deep down he was emotionally entangled with her. The guilt began consuming him like a slow poison. Yet her magnetism was undeniable. Meanwhile, Olivia, dealing with mysterious headaches and dizziness, was prescribed mild medication by her obstetrician. Sierra, cunning as she was, saw the perfect opening. She had enough knowledge from previous visits to the Whitmore home to know where Olivia kept her medicine. Olivia's routine was simple. She'd take her prenatal vitamins and this new prescription pill once each morning. Sierra befriended one of the housekeeping staff at the Whitmore estate, an unsuspecting young woman in desperate need of extra money for her family's medical bills. It was a vulnerability Sierra leveraged well, promising a significant sum in cash. Sierra asked the housekeeper to slip small, colorless powders into Olivia's morning juice or water. She assured the housekeeper it was harmless, chalking it up to a doctor's recommended herbal supplement. The housekeeper, naive and vulnerable, rationalized that if it was requested by someone close to Mr. Whitmore, it must be legitimate. In truth, the powders were unregulated sedatives and mild tranquilizers. The intention was never to kill Olivia. Sierra knew that would be too extreme, too risky. She wanted her out of the picture quietly and inevitably. If Olivia's health deteriorated, Marcus might begin to see her as an invalid, a burden. Perhaps he would lose the child, or Olivia's pregnancy might become too complicated to continue. In Sierra's twisted logic, removing the obstacle of the child would free Marcus. If Olivia was incapacitated, physically weakened, or mentally unstable, the marriage would break under the strain. Sierra could sweep in as the supportive presence at Marcus's side. And in the chaos, if Olivia lost the baby, well, so be it. Gradually, Olivia's health worsened. She began fainting, her limbs trembled, her heartbeat raced at odd hours. She woke up disoriented, sometimes forgetting entire conversations. Doctors were puzzled. They detected no major abnormalities in her standard tests. They ran scans, but everything seemed normal, aside from mild fatigue and low blood pressure. Olivia felt helpless and terrified. Why was this happening now, so close to the due date? Marcus, torn between business and his wife's mysterious illness, increased his presence at home. He canceled a few crucial trips and demanded the best specialists examine her. During this time, Sierra would often call or text him, sometimes showing up to drop off get-well-soon flowers. When Olivia was awake, Sierra would adopt a concerned, almost tearful expression. But whenever Olivia wasn't looking, a triumphant glint shone in Sierra's eyes. It was a cruel performance, one she perfected with each passing day. The predator in a nurse's disguise. The tension reached a boiling point on a Thursday afternoon. Olivia, pale and trembling, collapsed in the mansion foyer. She had been walking toward the living room when her knees suddenly buckled. The silence before the fall was haunting. The soft thud of her body against the marble echoed like a gunshot. The staff rushed to her aid. Marcus, who happened to be working from home that day, was by her side in seconds. He scooped her into his arms, ignoring the clamor of panicked voices around him. She was barely conscious, beads of sweat dotting her forehead. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her fingers curled weakly against his chest. An ambulance was called. As they sped toward Mount Sinai, Olivia's breath came in weak gasps. Marcus murmured her name over and over, his voice trembling. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, locking onto his. "Please, save our baby," she whispered through dry lips. Then darkness overtook her once more. In that terrifying moment, guilt and fear crushed Marcus. He couldn't breathe. The weight of what he hadn't seen, what he had ignored, pressed on him like stone. He hadn't been the husband he ought to be, and now his wife and unborn child were in dire jeopardy. If only he knew that the true threat lurked not in the random cruelty of fate, but in a woman he had allowed too close to his heart. Olivia was rushed into the emergency wing of Mount Sinai. Her obstetrician, Dr. Marin Holt, immediately ordered tests. They discovered that her blood pressure had plummeted dangerously, and her body showed signs of irregular sedation, yet she hadn't reported taking any extra medication. Not beyond what Dr. Holt had prescribed. Over the next hour, as Olivia lay semi-conscious in her hospital bed, specialists probed for answers. They considered every possibility: preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, even rare autoimmune conditions. Yet the lab results pointed to a foreign substance in her bloodstream. It wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. Small traces of tranquilizers, not typically prescribed for pregnant women, were found. This was a red flag. Marcus, frantic and desperate for answers, racked his memory. He realized that Olivia had been complaining about her medication feeling off recently. She said it made her dizzy, but Dr. Holt's prescription was standard and mild. Something else was in her system. Determined to protect Olivia, Marcus demanded an investigation. He asked the staff at the mansion to recall any unusual events, any suspicious deliveries, anything that might have tampered with Olivia's routine. Voices overlapped, memories blurred, but one face turned pale. It was the young housekeeper who cracked under the pressure, overwhelmed by the near-death scare and the guilt gnawing at her conscience. She confessed everything to Marcus and the authorities. She admitted receiving money from Sierra Langston to mix powders into Olivia's drinks. The housekeeper's face streamed with tears as she described how Sierra had manipulated her with easy cash, claiming it was a harmless herbal supplement that would help Olivia relax. Her hands trembled as she spoke, eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. She had believed the lie, believed she was helping. Now, she was a pawn in something far darker than she could have imagined. She never suspected she was being used as an accomplice in something so sinister. Marcus listened in horror, his fists clenched, jaw tight. Each word felt like a blade. Each tear, a confirmation that he had failed to protect the woman he loved. The staff around him trembled in the face of his fury. The moment the confession ended, Marcus's entire demeanor changed. He looked as though he had aged years in just a few hours, his eyes shadowed by betrayal and rage. His shoulders sagged under the weight of a truth too heavy to carry. Then he straightened, no longer just a grieving husband, but a man ready for war. He ordered security to escort the housekeeper off the premises after she finished speaking to the police. He then phoned his top legal advisors and demanded to know the protocol for pressing charges. The next call he made was to Sierra Langston's number. There was no answer. As Olivia stabilized in the ICU, Marcus found himself alone in the hospital corridor. The polished floors and the hum of overhead fluorescent lights made him feel like the world had narrowed to a pinpoint. Each second passed like a lifetime. He stood frozen in that sterile silence, suffocated by what-ifs and could-haves. He pressed his forehead against the glass window, gazing at Olivia, hooked up to IV drips and monitors. Their baby was still alive, though the doctors warned that Olivia needed to remain under close observation. Premature labor was a real concern. The sight of her, so still, so fragile, broke something in him. And somewhere inside the hollowness of guilt, a spark of fury ignited. Now in that moment, Marcus realized the full weight of what had transpired. He had let a woman slither into his life and drive a wedge between him and the one person who mattered the most. He felt an acute shame for letting Sierra get too close. Her presence in his life was a betrayal to Olivia, even if he had never consummated the affair. With shaking hands, he dialed Sierra again. This time she answered. Before she could speak, Marcus unleashed a fury of accusations, his voice reverberating through the corridor, drawing curious glances from passing nurses and patients. "You drugged my wife. You put my child's life at risk. What the hell is wrong with you?" he roared, his voice cracking with both anger and heartbreak. Sierra tried to respond, feigning shock, then quickly shifting to denial. But the moment Marcus mentioned the housekeeper's confession, Sierra ended the call. She didn't even offer a final word. Just silence, cold and damning. Marcus stood there, phone still in hand, feeling as though the floor beneath him might split in two. The woman he had naively trusted for business expansions, the woman who had wormed her way into his personal sphere, had tried to murder his unborn child, or at the very least sabotage the pregnancy. The question hammered at his mind. Why? No reason would make sense of such evil. Legal authorities quickly got involved. The next 12 hours were a blur. Marcus gave a statement. The housekeeper testified, and detectives began working to locate Sierra. It appeared she had fled her apartment. Her phone was switched off, and no one knew where she had gone. But Marcus knew. She wouldn't vanish forever. She was too cunning, too prideful. Somewhere she'd be plotting her next move. Meanwhile, Olivia woke with a fragile grip on reality. She clung to Marcus's hand, her eyes brimming with fear. Is the baby?" she whispered. "We're doing everything we can," Marcus replied, his voice low and tender. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears threatening to break free. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. I never meant for any of this." His words caught in his throat. He couldn't bring himself to confess the nature of his involvement with Sierra, how the lines of loyalty had blurred, how he'd allowed his weakness to feed Sierra's ambition. Olivia's eyes brimmed with tears of anguish. She nodded slowly, and for a moment Marcus felt their bond. Wounded, but unbroken. The love they shared was raw and real, even under the weight of betrayal. Sierra Langston had not expected things to spiral so quickly. She had planned to keep drugging Olivia just enough to create complications, not to have her end up in the hospital with an entire squad of detectives sniffing around. Panic seized her when she realized the housekeeper's confession was an inevitable outcome. Once doctors found traces of tranquilizers, Sierra had no time to waste. She fled her upscale apartment in Tribeca, ditched her phone and credit cards, and hopped on a bus to Philadelphia, paying cash for the ticket. She booked a week-long stay at a modest hotel under a false name. Her pride stung at having to step down from her usual luxury accommodations, but desperation left her no choice. She spent sleepless nights watching the news, expecting any day to see her splashed across every channel, wanted in connection to the attempted murder of a pregnant woman. But to her surprise and uneasy relief, the story hadn't yet gone mainstream. Perhaps Marcus was keeping the press at bay, not wanting a scandal that could harm his wife and unborn baby. Despite the tension, Sierra couldn't entirely stifle the bitterness within her. She still saw herself as the rightful partner to Marcus Whitmore. If only Olivia hadn't existed, if only she'd had a bit more time. Sierra believed the plan would have worked if circumstances had played out differently. She refused to accept total responsibility, even telling herself that Olivia had brought on her own misery. This twisted self-justification drove her to pick up her phone again and again, only to remember she had discarded it. She was a fugitive in all but legal name. 3 days into her hiding, she saw a missed call on her new burner phone, a call from an unknown number. Her chest seized with hope that it might be Marcus, reaching out to her, wanting an explanation. She picked up, but the line was dead. In her paranoia, she assumed it could be the police or a private investigator tracing her. Fear and rage battled within her, and for the first time she realized the magnitude of her mistakes. Maybe it had gone too far. Sierra started calling in favors from acquaintances, looking for hush money to relocate or get a forged passport. Most of them refused. Nobody wanted to be implicated. She had burned too many bridges with her manipulative ways and was now alone in her downfall. In the still hours of night, haunted by the knowledge that her life in New York was over, Sierra wrestled with a grim question: should I return and face the consequences? The alternative was living as a fugitive, constantly looking over her shoulder. She imagined a world where her name was forever reviled, her PR career destroyed, her dream of wealth and prestige reduced to ashes. The monstrous irony was that the more she ran, the more damning her guilt appeared. Yet she wasn't ready to surrender. She still nursed a delusional hope that Marcus might intervene, that he might pity her, or at least pay her off to disappear. The thought made her cling to a glimmer of possibility, even as she sank deeper into the pit of her own making. Meanwhile, Olivia's condition stabilized under strict medical supervision. She had to remain hospitalized for the remainder of her pregnancy. The baby, a girl, was still under critical watch, but showed promising vital signs. The doctors advised complete bed rest, minimal stress, and a controlled environment. Olivia, though visibly weakened, found renewed determination to protect her child. She spent hours each day imagining holding her daughter for the first time, cherishing the thought that this tiny life within her had withstood such malice and refused to give up. Marcus, standing by Olivia's bedside day and night, orchestrated a discreet but relentless manhunt for Sierra. He enlisted top private investigators and maintained close contact with the police. The housekeeper, facing legal repercussions, cooperated fully in exchange for leniency. Through her testimony, law enforcement compiled a compelling case against Sierra Langston. Charges range from assault with a deadly weapon, the weapon being a harmful sedative administered to a pregnant woman, to attempted homicide of an unborn child. Investigators uncovered receipts, text threads, and surveillance clips. Every piece of evidence painted a chilling portrait of premeditation. A few weeks later, a break in the case came when a private investigator tracked Sierra's pattern of withdrawing small amounts of cash from different ATMs. Near the Philadelphia border, a stakeout confirmed her location at a rundown motel off the interstate. Law enforcement arrived in force, blocking off all exits. Officers moved in under the cover of early morning fog. Inside room 27, a flickering lamp and an unmade bed were the only signs of life, until the door burst open. Sierra, realizing there was no escape, stumbled from her room, hair disheveled, eyes wild. She clutched a small suitcase, possibly containing the last remnants of her ill-gotten funds. Her mouth opened to protest, but her voice cracked under pressure. She barely managed a pathetic plea of innocence before being taken into custody. The media, who had been fed bare-bones details so far, pounced on the story. Once Sierra was arrested, news outlets plastered her face across their broadcasts, labeling her the mistress turned poisoner in sensational headlines. Marcus, despite wanting to protect Olivia's privacy, found himself in front of cameras, giving a brief statement. He thanked the authorities, reaffirmed his commitment to seeking justice, and asked for prayers for his wife and child's recovery. He refused to answer any questions relating to the nature of his personal relationship with Sierra. Still in recovery, Olivia watched the coverage alone, mute TV, loud emotions. Her emotions swung between relief and fury, relief that Sierra was caught, fury that it had come this far. For the first time since the scandal broke, she confronted Marcus. "Tell me everything," she said weakly, her eyes filled with tears. "I need to know how close you two got." Marcus's eyes dropped to the floor, a wave of guilt pressing against his chest. "I never slept with her," he whispered, voice trembling. "But I let her get close. We went on business trips. I let her flirt, and it was my fault. I should have cut it off, seen the warning signs." His voice broke. The shame was no longer just internal. It sat in the room with them, undeniable and heavy. He swallowed hard. "Instead, I was selfish and foolish. I wanted to believe it was harmless, but it wasn't. And you almost paid for my stupidity, with your life and our baby's life." Olivia bit back tears, grappling with the pain of betrayal. Yet she also knew that Marcus had stood by her through the ordeal, that his remorse was genuine. "I feel so lost," she admitted, wiping her wet cheeks. Marcus sank onto the bed beside her, careful to avoid tangling. The IV tubes tangled gently beside her as Marcus wrapped his arms around her. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered. "All I can do is be here, for you and our daughter. I'll spend the rest of my life making it right, if you let me." In that moment, Olivia saw the man she once knew, haunted by a mistake that nearly shattered their family. Her heart ached with love and sorrow, hope and caution. She closed her eyes, letting his warmth envelop her, taking solace in the thought that maybe, just maybe, they could heal. Sierra's trial turned into a spectacular media event, drawing an onslaught of reporters, bloggers, and social media commentators who flocked to the Manhattan criminal court. Headlines labeled her everything from the poisoning mistress to the vicious vixen of the Upper East Side. Tabloids ran side-by-side photos, one of Sierra in designer heels, the other in handcuffs. It was a fall from grace the public couldn't stop watching. With every passing day, more lurid details emerged, feeding the public's fascination with wealth, betrayal, and power gone awry. Inside the packed courtroom, the tension felt electric. Prosecutors presented an airtight case, beginning with the housekeeper's emotional confession. Pale-faced and trembling, she recounted how Sierra had lured her into the scheme with promises of easy money. Her voice cracked as she admitted she thought it was just a vitamin blend. She said it would help the pregnancy. The girl whispered, staring at the floor. "I didn't know." A forensic toxicologist then took the stand, detailing exactly how the tranquilizers found in Olivia's system were harmful to both mother and unborn child. Each piece of evidence hammered home the gravity of Sierra's actions. This was not a crime of passion, but a coldly calculated attempt to remove an unwanted obstacle. Witness after witness testified to Sierra's manipulative nature. Corporate executives described her unusual closeness to Marcus during out-of-town business trips. A former colleague from her PR firm confessed that Sierra often bragged of landing an influential man to accelerate her career. She said being close to power was the only way to build your own, the colleague recalled. She didn't just want success, she wanted his world. Even acquaintances from high society gala events she had helped organize recalled overhearing Sierra's thinly veiled resentment toward Olivia, whom she perceived as lucky to have landed the perfect husband. Each testimony added to an image of a woman driven by envy and entitlement, not desperation. Marcus's turn on the witness stand was especially sobering. Though he kept his composure, the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. He spoke of Sierra's cunning infiltration into his personal life, how she systematically distanced him from Olivia by exploiting work-related stress. "She made herself indispensable," he said quietly, "and I let her." His voice was steady, but every word cost him. Each revelation underscored the danger of underestimating a seemingly devoted associate. The courtroom fell silent when Marcus described his horror upon realizing that Olivia had been methodically drugged, an act so abhorrent that Marcus's voice caught in his throat. Sierra's defense team tried to spin a narrative of emotional instability, painting her as a victim of Marcus's wealth and power. They claimed she had been driven by heartbreak and merely provided harmless herbal supplements to alleviate Olivia's pregnancy-related stress. They even went so far as to imply Olivia had exaggerated her symptoms, as if she had orchestrated some elaborate plot to frame Sierra. But the jury saw through the feeble illusions. The chemical composition of the tranquilizers was irrefutable. The damning text messages and bank records were unmistakable. As the trial neared its conclusion, the prosecution delivered a scorching closing argument. They played on the universal morality that an unborn child is among the most vulnerable of all victims. They described Sierra's actions as an assault, not just on Olivia, but on life itself. By the time the prosecutor finished speaking, the courtroom felt charged with anger and heartbreak, for a family nearly destroyed by one woman's obsession. When the verdict was finally read, guilty on multiple counts, including attempted murder of an unborn child, Sierra appeared momentarily stunned. Yet her eyes flickered with a strange defiance, as though she still believed she had been wronged. The judge, unyielding in her condemnation, handed down a lengthy prison sentence, citing Sierra's premeditation and the cruelty of her actions as aggravating factors that warranted no mercy. The echo of the gavel fell final, like the slam of a door sealing Sierra's fate. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about Marcus and Olivia's reaction. Cameras flashed mercilessly, capturing every weary line etched into Marcus's face. His statement was brief. He thanked law enforcement and the judicial system for delivering justice, reiterated his relief that Olivia and their baby had survived, and asked for privacy as they continued to heal. He then turned his back on the chaos, leaving the crowd to wonder how a man once lauded for his unshakable resolve had nearly lost everything to a trusted confidant turned would-be murderer. Yet for Sierra, the ultimate blow of karma did not fall in the courtroom, but in her personal life. From a holding cell, she made desperate phone calls to old contacts, hoping one of them would post bail, or at least express sympathy. She called her father, an influential businessman who had once abandoned her mother, and left Sierra to fend for herself, yet whose resources she believed might still save her. Instead, she received a curt dismissal. He wanted no part in the fiasco she had created. His betrayal mirrored the very abandonment Sierra had strived her entire life to avoid. One by one, the doors of support slammed shut. Former colleagues refused her calls, unwilling to taint their reputations by defending a convicted criminal. Industry insiders who had once admired her PR expertise now shuddered at her name, erasing any reference to her from their networks. The friendships she had cultivated through flattery and opportunism evaporated. Sierra had spent years perfecting the art of manipulation, only to find that when her empire of lies crumbled, there was no one left to pick up the pieces. Wearing a prison jumpsuit and staring through iron bars, she realized how thoroughly she had destroyed her life. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of unchecked greed and envy. Alone in her cell, night stretched into a relentless stream of regret. She was left with nothing but the echoes of her former ambitions and the haunting knowledge that she had damned herself through her own actions. Thus, the woman who once dreamed of capturing a millionaire's heart and living in luxury ended up in a stark, lonely cage, utterly forsaken by the world. She had tried to claw her way into someone else's life. Sierra Langston's story became a cautionary tale of betrayal and obsession, serving as an eternal reminder that no scheme, no matter how cunning, can protect you from the merciless hand of karma. A hush fell over the hospital corridor when Olivia cradled her newborn daughter for the very first time. After months of uncertainty, her arms finally encircled Amelia Whitmore, tiny, perfect, and mercifully unharmed by Sierra's vile plot. The pastel walls of the maternity ward had witnessed countless stories of life and rebirth. Yet the miracle of this particular moment felt especially profound. Soft lamplight illuminated Olivia's tear-streaked face as she gazed at Amelia's fluttering eyelashes, overwhelmed by a gratitude so immense it stole her breath. Marcus stood at her side, watching in awe. His heart felt split wide open, wrestling with a knot of guilt and love. He had come so close to losing them both. Over the past few months, the hospital had become their second home, a place where Olivia battled the effects of the sedatives that nearly claimed her life, and where Amelia fought for stability in the womb. Now, as Amelia rested safely in her mother's embrace, Marcus could not stop the tears from streaming down his cheeks. He reached out a trembling hand to stroke his daughter's soft curls, silently promising never to let them come to harm again. During Olivia's prolonged hospital stay, the world outside had raged with scandal. Reporters hounded the Whitmore estate, hungry for any new angle on Sierra Langston's arrest and trial. News vans parked like vultures at the gates. Cameras waited for cracks to appear in the perfect facade. But within those walls, amid the steady beep of monitoring machines and the whispered reassurances of nurses, Olivia and Marcus found a quiet, unspoken unity. They both realized how easily life's most precious gifts could slip away when trust was broken and when evil was allowed to fester. When Olivia was finally well enough to return home, she discovered that life outside the hospital felt strangely unfamiliar. Memories of her collapse lingered in the hallways of the mansion like ghosts. Every corner whispered what almost was. She flinched whenever she passed the foyer floor where she had fainted. The staff, though attentive, seemed to tread on eggshells, terrified of upsetting her or reminding her of the trauma. Even the taste of the juice in the mornings made her stomach churn. She couldn't forget how Sierra's poison had been so easily slipped into her drink. The changes in Marcus were equally startling. He had always been a driven entrepreneur, his gaze fixed on the next acquisition or investment. But now he insisted on taking time off, delegating major business responsibilities to a trusted group of executives. Each morning, rather than rushing out the door to meet with high-profile clients, he'd sit with Olivia in the nursery, holding Amelia while Olivia ate a light breakfast. He would read baby books, sometimes stumbling through silly lullabies, all in an effort to bond with his daughter. These moments felt tender and new, far removed from the corporate deals and towering cityscapes that once consumed him. He no longer measured success in market shares, but in his daughter's laugh and the softness returning to Olivia's smile. Still, every so often, guilt would seize Marcus's expression, revealing the burden he carried. He had allowed Sierra to manipulate him into near ruin, almost costing Olivia and Amelia their lives. Sometimes he would sit alone after Olivia fell asleep, whispering apologies into the quiet, hoping the walls would carry them to her heart. The day Olivia brought up marriage counseling, he agreed without hesitation, desperate to make amends and earn back the trust he had so carelessly endangered. Their first therapy session took place 2 weeks after Amelia's birth. The therapist's office was a cozy room in a quiet Manhattan brownstone, decorated with soft blues and whites, designed to be a haven from the storm of cameras and headlines. Olivia clutched a small blanket of Amelia's as she spoke, her voice fraught with tension. She confessed feeling torn. On one hand, she loved Marcus deeply. On the other, she felt betrayed by the emotional bond he'd allowed to form with Sierra. Marcus listened, at times unable to meet her eyes. He described how Sierra's flattery had seduced him during a period of intense professional and personal stress, though he adamantly maintained he had never physically cheated. He acknowledged that emotional betrayal could be just as damaging. Their therapist guided them gently through discussions of boundaries, forgiveness, and the steps needed to rebuild what had been broken. Painful revelations emerged. Olivia admitted she had sometimes felt overshadowed by Marcus's success and worried she wasn't exciting enough to keep him interested. Marcus admitted he had found Sierra's ambition captivating because it reminded him of his own ruthless drive to succeed. Something Olivia, with her gentle heart, did not share. It was a raw confrontation with truths they had never dared speak aloud. Session by session, they learned to navigate the intricacies of trust all over again. They practiced open communication. No more hidden phone calls, no more late-night business trips without transparent scheduling. Marcus promised to be accountable for his every move, not as a sign of subservience, but as a gesture of respect and reassurance to Olivia. In return, Olivia worked to let go of the anxiety that flared whenever he left her sight, understanding that constant suspicion could corrode what remained of their bond. As summer gave way to early autumn, a gentle shift happened within the Whitmore estate. The once suffocating heaviness began to lift, replaced by the warmth of new possibilities. The media circus cooled after Sierra's trial concluded, and the gates of the estate were no longer swarmed with cameramen. Neighbors who had once whispered rumors now stopped by with baby gifts and flowers, eager to show support. But not all healing took place behind closed doors. Olivia, having experienced the darkest side of betrayal, felt a pressing need to ensure no one else endured the same terror she had survived. She partnered with Mount Sinai Hospital to establish an initiative aimed at educating pregnant women on the signs of poisoning, domestic maltreatment, and financial or emotional manipulation. Using her background in event planning, she organized benefit dinners and public talks, hoping to shed light on how easy it was for a predator like Sierra to operate unchecked. At the first major fundraiser, Olivia stood behind a lectern in an elegant black gown, Amelia's name engraved on a small pendant around her neck. The audience was rapt as Olivia recounted her brush with death, describing the dizzy spells and fainting episodes that escalated until she was rushed to the hospital, fighting for her baby's life. Her voice trembled. A hush fell across the room as she described the moment her world darkened. The whisper to Marcus in the ambulance, the fear that she might never hold her child. Raw tears filled her eyes as she implored the crowd never to dismiss their intuition and never to excuse suspicious behavior. The applause at the end was thunderous, with many guests wiping away tears of their own. Some stood to clap, others simply bowed their heads, moved not only by her survival, but by her strength. Meanwhile, Marcus threw himself into supporting Olivia's cause. He donated significant funds from Whitmore Holdings to bolster hospital programs offering protective services to vulnerable women. Motivated by his own guilt, he launched a scholarship in Amelia's name to train young investigators in forensic toxicology. He had learned the hard way that ignorance could be deadly. His philanthropic gestures garnered positive media attention, helping to restore some of the Whitmore brand's lost luster. More than that, however, it gave Marcus a sense of redemption. He was determined to use his power and influence for good, even if it was partly to atone for the role he played in letting Sierra slip into their lives. Months passed, and Amelia grew into a bright-eyed infant, cooing and gurgling with infectious curiosity. Then one day, Olivia found a letter in the mail from a women's correctional facility. The sender's name made her blood run cold. Sierra Langston. Inside the neatly folded pages, Sierra tried to explain herself, claiming she had been driven by desperation, haunted by her father's abandonment, and misled by an overwhelming admiration for Marcus's success. She apologized for the pain she had caused, but the letter also bore traces of Sierra's familiar manipulations. Pleas for understanding, subtle hints at her own suffering, a request for forgiveness when the time is right. Even in ink, her tone dripped with self-pity masked as remorse. A few lines were scratched out, rewritten, evidence of someone still trying to control the narrative. Still calculating. Olivia read the entire letter in one sitting, her hands shaking. Part of her wanted to rip it to shreds and throw it away. Yet another part felt an odd sense of closure. Sierra had done unspeakable harm, but perhaps writing this letter was a step, whether genuine or self-serving, toward acknowledging her crimes. Olivia chose not to respond. She placed the letter in a sealed box, taking comfort in the knowledge that the woman who tried to kill her child was behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. When she told Marcus about it, he stiffened, his jaw clenching. He asked if she felt threatened, but Olivia shook her head. This time, the fear didn't grip. She had walked through fire and emerged alive, stronger than Sierra could ever comprehend. By Amelia's first birthday, the Whitmore estate vibrated with a joy that hadn't filled its halls in a long time. Pink and white balloons adorned the front gates. A simple chocolate cake sat at the center of the dining table, and close friends and family gathered for an intimate celebration. Where once paparazzi might have thronged to catch a glimpse, this time only genuine well-wishers came. Laughter spilled from the living room, blending with Amelia's bright giggles as she reached out to snatch at ribbons and bows. Olivia, glowing with health and happiness, wore a soft smile as she watched Marcus crouch beside Amelia's high chair, helping their daughter cut the cake with her tiny hands. Memories of trauma still lingered in her mind, but she found solace in how love could reclaim a space once darkened by betrayal. A few steps away, Olivia's father stood proudly, chatting with close friends and showing off photos of his granddaughter. Even Marcus's mother, who had once been skeptical of Olivia's background, appeared supportive and doted on Amelia with genuine warmth. At one point in the celebration, Marcus gently pulled Olivia aside. The guests were busy marveling at the baby, so he and Olivia had a moment to themselves in a quiet corner of the sun-drenched garden. He reached for her hand. "I want you to know," he began, his voice earnest, "that every promise I made, to do better, to be worthy of you and Amelia, I take those seriously. I won't ever forget how close we came to losing everything." Olivia gazed at him, remembering the harrowing nights in the hospital, the tears she shed, and the therapy sessions that laid bare their deepest wounds. Yet the man standing before her now was not the same one who had once neglected her concerns in favor of professional ambition. His eyes carried a humility she had never before seen in them. She saw regret, yes, but also love, hope, and a determination to grow. "I believe you," she whispered. "We'll keep rebuilding, day by day, together." Their hands remained intertwined as they returned to the festivities, greeted by the cheerful chaos of a toddler's birthday party. Amelia squealed with delight as she smeared icing on her face, oblivious to the trials her parents had endured. For Olivia and Marcus, that innocent laughter was the sweetest sound in the world. It was a melody of second chances, a reminder that no matter how dark the path, love and resilience could still light the way. In time, they would both look back on this day as a turning point. The moment they chose not to be defined by Sierra Langston's treachery, but by the strength of a bond that, once nearly destroyed, refused to break. And as Amelia babbled nonsense syllables that sounded suspiciously like "da" and "mamar," they both smiled, knowing the future was theirs to protect. Their eyes shone with gratitude for the life they had reclaimed. The future was theirs. A blank canvas on which they could paint a story of healing, unity, and unwavering devotion. A family reborn from the ashes of betrayal. In the end, love and resilience triumphed over darkness. Olivia and Marcus Whitmore discovered that even in the face of the deepest betrayals and the greatest risks to their family, hope endures. Their daughter Amelia stands as a testament that life can blossom amidst adversity. Sierra Langston, driven by envy and greed, ultimately faced the crushing weight of her crimes, proving that no deceit remains hidden forever. Dear friend, thank you for spending these moments with us. You've just witnessed a story of betrayal, pain, and the kind of love that doesn't crumble, but rebuilds. Because sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from enemies, but from those we once called home. As the Stoics remind us, we cannot control the storm, only how we stand in it. Olivia and Marcus stood in the fire. They stumbled, they broke, but they chose to rise. Not perfectly, not instantly, but with intention, with courage. And maybe that's the quiet truth about resilience. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in forgiveness, in therapy, in holding your child a little tighter, in choosing, day by day, to begin again. So whatever you've been through, or are still walking through, please remember, you are not the pain that tried to destroy you. You are what you do with it. And your story isn't over yet. The canvas is still in your hands, from shadows to light, from betrayal to rebirth. This was the story of the Whitmore legacy and the power of a love that refused to die. If this story moved you even just a little, let us know. It helps more than you realize. Like this video to support these messages. Share it with someone who might need this hope, and subscribe for more raw, real, and redemptive stories just like this one. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being here. You matter.